Welcome, everyone, to the April edition of Conversations with Archbishop Kurtz. Can you believe this is the last segment of the 10th year?
Yeah, Brian, it's been a joy to work with you, and I hope that our efforts can enrich the lives of others. We get good feedback, and I'm just grateful to work with you in a team.
Thanks, Archbishop. It's been a pleasure for me, too.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have a really good show, as we always say, because they are good. We're going to talk this first segment about the priesthood. How are priests formed? What's seminary about? What's seminary like? We have some personal stuff in there too. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to hear from a special guest, Deacon Scott Hayner, who serves as the chair of the Board of Catholic Charities, and a big project they're engaging in. And the third segment will be a chance to hear your Lenten and Easter message.
Good, excellent.
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about priesthood first. Lots of people ask questions, how are priests formed? People know how people go to medical school or law school, but they go to seminary. What does that mean? So I want to talk about what is that like, and some elements of that.
Yeah, the word seminary itself, Brian, means seed, and so it's the planting and nurturing of a seed. And so the big word with seminary life is discernment, is understanding what God is calling people to do. I remember when I first entered the seminary, 1963, by the way, they still had seminaries then. I said to a priest, I'm going into the seminary to become a priest, and he said, no, you're not. I said, well, I think I am. He said, no, you're going to the seminary to see if God wants you to be a priest. It's to discern God's plan. And I was in the seminary for 9 years. Most of our seminarians are at least for 6 years, and some for even more. But anything so important like a lifelong commitment in the priesthood requires us for formation. And as Hope will get into a little bit, even after seminary, there's what we might call ongoing formation, which I think we take very seriously in the Archdiocese. So that gives you just a little bit about the purpose of a seminary. Maybe we can talk about the individual aspects of it.
Yeah, before we get into the aspects of formation or seminary, can we talk a little bit about what happens before? Perhaps it was the issue of the abuse crisis in the church, or just questions about where priests come from. Can you talk first about screening and how people enter seminary?
No, it's a good question, because I think for the person's benefit, but also for the good of the church, the bishop always needs to call forth people who we believe are being called by God to be a priest, but that are going to respond to the pastoral needs. So it's important that the bishop keeps in mind the pastoral needs of that diocese or that religious community. And then we're interested in the welfare of the person, to make sure that they have the proper human qualities, that as much as possible they're going in to the seminary for the right reasons. Now, knowing that in formation, our reasons get purified. We grow in God's call. I always say that someone going into the seminary either gets stronger or weaker, but we never stay the same in our efforts to have this sense that I'm on the right track. So we do have psychological as well as academic formation. We'll talk a little bit, the formation itself that comes from really the document Pastoris Dabo Vobis in the early 1990s from St. John Paul II said that formation needs to be human, it needs to be intellectual, spiritual, and social. And so in all aspects, this formation is required, and we begin by making sure that this person is ready to enter into this formation.
Well, that's a great overview. Let's go detailed.
Sure.
Let's take it one at a time. Perhaps let's talk about human formation.
Yeah, human. I think it's our Holy Father at that time, St. John Paul II, said that a priest needs to be a man of communion. In other words, if someone is completely self-centered, narcissistic, thinks only of himself, priesthood's really not for that person. In other words, you need to have those human qualities that God gives you that moves you to serve others. And so integrity, honesty, the ability to serve others, humility, all those qualities are things that are human qualities that need to develop. We need to make sure, since a priest is being called to the charism of celibacy, to live lifelong purity and service for others, not in a married state, but in a single chaste state. That's a very important that be healthy, and that it not be something that I guess you could say curtails the person, but allows that person to thrive in that vocation. I know personally, going through the seminary and living a life of a priest, I have found that the priesthood has been for me an opportunity to thrive in my own human formation.
The second one is spiritual. Now, these are not like separate years.
No, you're right. It overlaps. I think it's important to look at the qualities, but human formation involves spiritual, obviously. It involves our prayer, and it involves a sense of the man being someone who is a man of God, who cherishes, when he celebrates Mass, it's not a performance, but it's really coming from his heart. And that development of the spiritual life means understanding the history of spirituality and be able to build what we would call spiritual habits in our lives.
Now, intellectual formation is interesting because I don't know if everybody really knows that they're earning a graduate degree. This is serious study.
No, it is. Both background in philosophy and theology. People would, of course, not be surprised that it'd be theology. But it's also important. I find that sometimes logic and some of the professions related to philosophy are important because we need people who are critical thinkers, who are able to think on their own feet and to develop those abilities. Liberal arts education in its best way, a wide understanding of knowledge and of wisdom and the ability to be able to enter into theological speculation and study is very important. So intellect is very important.
And the fourth one, I've heard it called social, I've heard it called pastoral.
Pastoral. It is. It's really the ability to relate in serving others. And you can imagine the breadth. Just take a pastor and all the ways in which he pastorally serves individuals, communities, through his homilies, through his service to the sick. All of these things take skill and development of the natural gifts that God has given to a person. So you can see that after at least 6 years, that person is ready for ordination, is fit for ministry, and with the help of others, Father Jeff Schuner, our vicar for priests, and Father Bill Hammer, who's now in charge of the ongoing formation of priests, they work hard in supporting our priests who continue to deepen their formation as they continue to serve others.
I think that's great that during some of the summers we meet our seminaries because they're often in the parishes and they're spending time with us. So we get to see up front. Whenever I see them, I wonder about other priests' experiences. So you're the one here today. So tell us about your seminary experience. You were ordained in 72?
In 1972. I entered the seminary in 63, Brian. I love the seminary. I'm not sure if I'm an exception or not, but actually I did. I just went back to St. Charles Seminary this past August to lead a priest retreat. And it was old nostalgia, you know, when you go back and retrace your steps. So it was very helpful for me to do that and enriching. Seminary in the 1960s was different than it is now. And so we didn't have quite the emphasis on pastoral formation. It was only toward the end of my time that we began to do that. But I always was inclined to the pastoral opportunities. And I think it was good formation. Some of my family might say, well, you could have been formed a little better. I mean, who knows? We're not perfect. But I think the formation at that time was good. And the friendships and the communion that I've had with brother priests continues throughout. The ability to be able to work and engage with lay leaders. These are all qualities that I think develop over time, and it's kind of like watching a plant grow. You know, you don't say, well, this is when that person learned one thing. So I can think back to the rich experiences I had both within the seminary, but also in the pastoral work, as you just said, working in parishes, or I taught in high school for a little while, and did some really enriching opportunities.
When you visit seminaries today, you visit our seminary, where our students go.
Of course, mostly St. Meinrad. We have a lot. St. Mary's of the West in Cincinnati, at Catholic U Theological College. We have some others. The Brute Seminary for our college students up in Indianapolis is very good. But all the seminaries we use I have great confidence in.
That's great.
And I'm always impressed also by the quality of our seminarians. I think if you just mentioned that sometimes a seminarian will come to Holy Trinity, your parish, I think if people meet some of our seminarians, they're going to say, boy, the church is in good hands. Christ continues to call really wonderful young men to serve in the future as holy priests.
You guessed my last question. I was going to ask you, what could you tell us, just the characteristics of our present-day seminarians?
Yeah, I think they're engaged. I think they're very intelligent and talented, and I think they're eager. I get that sense that they're kind of the way I was when I was in the seminary. Come on, I want to get out there and start to serve.
Yeah, very good. Very
It's
good.
great.
Well, this is great to talk about, and we're going to come back in just a couple minutes, and we're going to meet our special guest for this month's show, which is Deacon Scott Hayner. We're going to talk about Catholic Charities. Be right back.